Imagine, just imagine for a second, you are Rishi Sunak. You are in this position where you have had, well, you were put in your position, shall we say, by your message that you were going to bring an end to all this Tory chaos that had been going on, that you were the one who could finally right this ship, that could stop it from sinking, that could correct the course and get everything back on track. Metaphor, 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 metaphor. But as we've said all through Sunak's, should we say, tenure in office, what has he exactly done to actually try and achieve that? Well, he came up with a 5-point plan. Not one of those 5 points has he actually managed to really achieve. Even the inflation one, he's not exactly responsible for. He just crossed his fingers, hid under the desk, him and Jeremy Hunt huddled together, hoping that inflation would just, go away and go down. We've heard this morning that, of course, that the UK economy is now no longer in a recession. I can guarantee you at some point in the not too distant future, put a phone call in now, you can guarantee Sunak or someone from the Conservative Party, or probably Rishi Sunak, will try and take credit for the economy somehow becoming better. But again, we ask this question: what exactly did the Conservatives do to actually achieve this growth? Exactly. So imagine still you are Rishi Sunak, you are in this position, and then you've had all these bad results. Main hope was, of course, that you would hang on to 2 of your regional mayors. Ben Houchen sort of comfortably, although definitely signs he's in trouble next election for sure, managed to win. And then, of course, Andy Street lost in a very, very narrow election that went down to a recount. And we're still waiting, I think, for Andy Street's going to come out and hit Sunak. But then, of course, you have your MP walks across, defects literally right before PMQs. Say what you want about the woman. I know, hard right, Brexiteer, whatever. But what should have Labour have done? Just say, sorry, we're not going to have you. So what does she end up doing? Probably sitting on the backbenches still. Meanwhile, that defection puts even more pressure on Rishi Sunak, makes him look like an even worse leader of the Conservative Party, which leads to more problems for him down the line. And if it's true that there are more Tory MPs considering defecting, this only puts more pressure on Rishi Sunak. And bear this in mind. If, let's say, one of the Scottish Conservatives in Westminster said he wanted to defect to the SNP, the SNP are going to go, come on, welcome on board, join in the fun. Do you think the SNP would say no? When you come and say, oh, they would absolutely refuse on. No, they wouldn't. They would absolutely love and welcome a Conservative, Scottish Conservative into their fold in Westminster. They love it. And remember, this puts pressure on Rishi Sunak. This just makes it even worse for him. It makes his position even more untenable. And now, bear in mind, Rishi Sunak's his only bright spot, his only hope, that you had Ben Houchen winning. What does Ben Houchen come out and do? He goes out, does a radio interview, and throws Rishi Sunak completely under the bus. He just completely throws him under the bus. So this is what he said on I think it was, yeah, BBC Radio Tees. When asked if the Prime Minister was to blame for the Conservative problems, Houchen said, ultimately, it always rests on the shoulders of the leader. All responsibility goes back to the top. It's the same in my job as well. Gee. I wonder if Houchen's going to take responsibility for all that, dodgy business dealings that's going on the Teesside Freeport. Anyway, he continues. He said, ultimately, you're the one responsible for it. But there are lots of people who are involved in the problems with the Conservative Party. It's a bit of chaos at the minute, right? Isn't it? There's lots of people fighting with each other in the Conservative Party. There are defections going on, and ultimately, the public do not vote for parties who are not united and are not presenting a united front, so they aren't talking to the public. If they're fighting with each other like rats in a sack, instead of saying to the public, this is what we're going to do for you, then that doesn't win elections. Ultimately, it lies with Rishi, but there are lots of people that need to get their act together to stop messing about and start talking to the public about what they can offer them rather than just fighting with each other. He said, if the government actually wants to get on and deliver some real things and actually show themselves to be competent, then there is a way, though, to be able to get some of that respect back, some of that confidence from the public, and it would help reduce the gap, what is a very, very large gap at the minute, he said. Yeah, he's just thrown Sunak under the bus. Bear in mind, what are the problems of the Conservative Party? Well, it comes down to a lack of leadership and a lack of, again, to quote Jacob Rees-Mogg, and wasn't really too far off the mark, a lack of vision. What is it the Conservative Party actually wants to do with its time in power? Rishi Sunak hasn't actually really pursued any of the goals that Boris Johnson set out in his 2019 manifesto. Boris himself caused a lot of chaos, but at least you sort of knew what the Boris Johnson government was all about. Liz Truss's 49 days in government, we sort of knew, because she set out her stall, what she wanted to do. She set out the direction she wanted to go. Now, of course, that direction was straight off a cliff edge, but at least you knew what she was going to do. You have no clue really what Rishi Sunak wants to do. And people are going to say, oh, but what about his 5 pledges? Well, what about those 5 pledges is Rishi Sunak actually doing? Houchen talks about other people in the party causing trouble and the trouble being caused in the Conservative Party. Ultimately, that also comes down to Rishi. It comes down to what we've talked about time and time again, the lack of leadership that Rishi Sunak is showing by not going in there and cracking some heads together and going, get on and listen with it. Ultimately, someone will have to do that at some point in the future. And when that actually happens, that is going to lead to a huge Conservative infighting. But until that actually happens, they're still going to be stuck in constant infighting themselves, because sooner or later, you've got to bring your party into line. You've got to bring your party into line. Party discipline does matter. But at the moment, the Conservative Party, as we've described before, is just so at odds with itself. It cannot agree a direction. It cannot agree stances. It cannot even really get legislation through, because if they do think, oh, actually, we'd quite like to do this, the other side goes, well, actually, we'd like to do that, but we'd like to do it our way. And, chaos ensues. So ultimately, if Rishi Sunak was hoping that Ben Houchen might throw, laurels and praise upon, Rishi Sunak, nope. So honestly, I hope all this really, really drives a general election sooner, because this is honestly just feels where we're going. Because at the end of the day, or at some point, Sunak himself has to realize, like, is it worth waiting? Is it worth, until, I don't know, November to try and, sort this out? He's been waiting for so long, and yet nothing he does, moves the dial, changes anything. You've just got a zombie parliament that continues to lurch forward from next thing to next thing to next thing, from month to month to month, and it still is not helping his position. So sooner or later, Sunak has to really realize he has to go for a general election. He has to. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. But hey, I didn't see Houchen coming out and throwing Sunak under the bus. So, but I suppose given his campaign, it was to be expected. When Rishi Sunak went to celebrate with Ben Houchen, Houchen was like keeping him at arm's distance. If you have a look at the photos, like there is clearly like this level of distance he is keeping on purpose from Rishi Sunak. But hey, with friends like these, Rishi, who needs enemies, right? So, as always, thanks very much for watching. And of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.